Let's all gather to the sewing machine. Let's make some machine stitched gathers. I'll show you how. Coming up. Hey, Chanel here, bringing you weekly videos to help you get better and better with your fashion sewing. And be more creative too. So be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you'll never miss out on a new video. So how do you make gathers? How do you make them well? This is a sample of a piece of fabric that I just gathered into a straight edge, and the trick is to get them to distributed evenly and to look smooth. You don't want it like a bunchy jump, bunch right there and then it kind of flat right there. You want to get it distributed evenly. How you do gathers is you just run 2 basting stitches, the longest stitch on your machine, and then you gather it up. If you don't know what basting stitch means, I have a sew bit early on, like number 2 or 4 or something, in my playlist here, and it's all about basting. Basically, it's the longest stitch on your machine, and it's meant to hold temporary, so that you can just try things on and things like that. So where do you see gathers? Gathers, you'll see them in like a dirndl skirt. Like this could actually be a dirndl skirt. They're gathered into a waistband. It'd be looking like that right there. You might see them in a bodice going into a waistband, like on a jumpsuit or something. Sometimes the bodice is kind of flat and there's just a little part that's gathered and it goes into parts of the waistband. I see that a lot. There's gathers in sleeves for sure, and I have a video on that too, how to do a puff sleeve. And sometimes you need a lot of them, and sometimes it's just a little bit, and just to kind of ease in the fabric. So it's just a technique to, make fabric fit into another piece of fabric right there. So I have this pattern on it's from 1983. Actually, I used this pattern to do the puff sleeve one, and I don't know where I got this pattern, but I love it. And actually, you can totally wear these all today. I mean, it's kind of really simple. There's even right here no puff sleeves or anything in here, just simple, because the early 80s was just starting to get into crazy puff sleeves. But actually it says 83 on the back of this. So anyway, where were we? I love the vintage stuff. That's when 1983 I moved to Los Angeles and started my design school. So that was a long time ago. I remember I wore puff sleeves with these little other things. What I'm seeing, and I totally seeing them in the stores right now, the little flange that's on top of the puff sleeve. I'm like, oh my God. I used to make a bunch of those. I think it was my uniform. Like a long time ago. So anyway, where were we? Gathers. So right here you see the gathers going into, there's a little yoke on this sleeve. It's a shoulder yoke, and you see them in the front here. And then if I switch it over to the back, you can see it going through the back. Now this sketch right here shows that there's a lot of gathers in there, but if I actually look at the pattern, this is the pattern of the yoke right here. So I'm going to show you as an example on the bottom yoke. This is going on the bottom part, but here is the back pattern right here. Now so the center backs show up right here, and then this is supposed to gather into this yoke. But look, there's not that much. Maybe, I'll get my fingers out of the way. There's maybe an inch past the shoulder, and that's supposed to gather in there. So there's really not much. This right here was, so like if this was like 10-inch piece of fabric here, this fabric here was doubled, so it's like 20 inches. So that's what that looks like. It kind of ruffles in there. Also, how you do ruffles, I have a video on that also, is the same thing. It's gathering, and there's a formula for just average ruffles. It's 2 times what you're putting it into. And if you want a lot of ruffles, or if you're doing like silk chiffon, which is really light and airy, you actually got to cut it 3 times the length to fit in there, because it all depends on the design, how you want it. If you just want a little bit, that kind of thing. So here are the pattern instructions. I love these instructions from the 80s because they were a little clearer to read. I love that they put blue in here. because a lot of people have trouble finding the right side, wrong side of this. So their blue means the right side, and then like you'll see on the other side, it's the wrong side. Actually, this is the other side of, or the other part to show the gathers. It's this, not the blue, so it's showing, you know what I'm trying to say when you're trying to sew. Anyway, gathering. So they show here to gather, use edge of front, to gather upper edge of front and back, machine based along lines indicated on the pattern. So just running 2 straight stitches, not reversing it or to knot it at all either, just 2 running stitches right there, and it says gather along these lines. So this is on the fold, so you just go from here to the other part of it where your notches are. So that's what those 2 lines mean. And if you have a 5/8 inch seam allowance, you want to put the 2 stitches above that 5/8 right here. So you can see right here that actually I sewed it right on there. You can, which I have done before, and it actually turns out really good. It depends on the fabric. If you can pull these stitches out really easy, you can actually sew like a quarter, and then at the 3/4 line do another stitch, and then you gather those, and then you actually just pull out that stitch when you get this whole thing stitched in. It actually makes really nice, it makes it a little easier to sew and stuff. I think I'll show that to you when I do the yoke piece here. I've got this bodice cut out here like that with the notches, and then here's the yoke, and so we got to fit this into this part, and I'll do the 1/4 inch down and then 3/4 inches down, and then do a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then pull out that gathering stitch. And as long as the fabric's thin enough, it works good. So I'll take you to the sewing machine, and we're going to put in the gathering stitches. All right, to get started, we turn the stitch length to the longest stitch, and also your bobbin thread, if you have a different color under there, it'll be easier to know which thread to pull when you are gathering it up. We always use the bobbin thread. It's a little bit looser. And also I like to zigzag what do you call it, pinking, use the pinking shears, because sometimes when you're working with gathers it starts to shred, you know, fray the fabric. So that's one thing I also like to do. So how we start is the instructions wanted us to sew between the notches here. So I'm just going to, I also put a 5/8 inch mark right here, so I know not to stitch on that, and I want to stitch above and below this. So we're just going to hit the gas, and I didn't reverse stitch. I'm just going to go above there between the notches, pick that up, clip that off, and then I'm going to take another stitch. I'm going to go a little bit past that 5/8 right there. It really helps if you have that seam marked. You can use the seam guides on the throat plate too. But there's our 2 stitches. We're going to be pulling the orange thread right here, because these tend to just be a little bit looser. So I'm going to show you how to gather that up. Okay, we have the 2 pieces here. I'm going to take the orange bobbin thread and just pull the 2, I'm just holding on to the threads and then pulling so that this fabric just kind of inches up between. And knowing the pattern, I don't have to gather it too much. This would because the pattern wasn't that much bigger right here, although the illustration looks bigger. So then we have an even distribution of gathers right here. You just kind of have to work it in there. Also, sometimes you'll have thread that fabric that kind of doesn't want to move. I'll take my pins and kind of help it move it around, as long as you don't scratch your fabric. If it's a tweed or something, that's probably not a good idea. Then you want to get this evenly distributed right here. Looks like my bottom, this thread's not working as well as the other one. Just get good at, you just kind of have to play around with these. Silk chiffon's like one of the easiest ones to gather. It's always fun, and it makes such pretty designs. Let's see. Okay, so we got that. Now, this, see, actually you can see the yoke is still a little bit bigger right here. So I'm gonna spread the gathers out a little bit more, like here. You can kind of see not much on the gathers there, in that zone right there. So we got the kind of match in there, and then we're gonna take it right sides together. And then the best thing to do with this is to pin it on the wrong side where you're gonna sew, so you can see you're sewing right between the, I'm gonna sew right above that stitch. And I got my marks on the other side. And I'm pretty good with 5/8 right there. I can kind of see this might be a clump right here, so I'm gonna distribute that a little bit better and just pin this down. If you're working on a real thick fabric or velvet especially, I'll actually sew right over the pins, and just when I'm coming close to a pin, I'll just, you know, protect my eyes. So right here, this one's just going in between the notches right there. So, and then I'm gonna spread them out a little bit like that. Make sure it's a little more even. That, then you can always just check it, see how it's gonna be looking right there. Just a little bit of a gather. So now I'm gonna take this over to the sewing machine and sew 5/8 all the way that way. Okay, now that I have my mark on my other side, I'm gonna use my seam guide right here and to get me an even 5/8 right there. And then I'm gonna put my thread to, or my stitch length back to its normal. I like to sew mine on 3. And then I'm gonna just stitch the seam. So I'm gonna go forward and then reverse. A little bit right there. Forward. Sew right over all that. And right here too, I'll just kind of help distribute the gathers. You gotta think they're gathers and not pleats. I'm gonna sew right in between that. Again, the gathers in there nice. Right there. Sometimes, there we go. That one's going sideways. Sometimes the fabric will go sideways and you'll have a weird little tuck. Take it to the end, reverse it, and then, let's see, we have stitched down. And I'll show you how we take that out. All right, so now we have it all nice and gathered there. And you can see I got it sewn right on that 5/8 right there, so at least I can see it from there. Now this bottom thread, all you gotta do is pull this out right here. As long as, see that one, if you go past the 3/4, it doesn't get caught in the stitch. So sometimes it's just much easier. You can actually then just pull that other thread out, and then it's all nice and even right here. So then what you want to do is then press up here, and just like a light steam like this, so you don't want to crunch your gathers. You just do like a, just barely have the iron hanging over that, and then finger press this part here. Then you don't crunch your gathers, and that's how nice the gathers turn out. Well, there you have it. Gathers are very easy to do and fun. Just do a little practice. Take some cotton broadcloth type fabrics and practice on it, and then especially if you got a lot of gathers in your garment you're making, definitely practice on that. Sometimes I'll overlock, because I told you about the pinking part right here. Sometimes you want to overlock if it's like a tweed or some kind of fabric that frays a lot, because when you're gathering this, the frays on top of that will drive you crazy. So you just want to be able to just to pull the threads and then gather it and not have fraying all over the place. But if you overlock it, don't cut the fabric. Just do it without the knife and then overlock it. And pinking really helps too. So if you have any questions or comments, please let me know, and I'll be glad to answer them. And have some fun with gathering. See you in the next sew bit.